Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to the Institute for Personal Development, Kriya Yoga Ashram, where total consciousness is the new frontier.
Kriya Yoga is union of the individual with the divine. Join us as we explore the practices to initiate this process.
Good morning. Welcome to the Voice of Yoga. Let's talk consciousness. I am your hostess, Winton, and with me is Kenny Toy, also known as Swami Jayananda, founder of the Institute for Personal Development, located here in Hampton, New Hampshire. Good morning, Swami. Thank you for being here today. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing pretty good today. How about you?
Well, I'm doing pretty good today, too. Thanks for asking. And we want to thank you all for tuning in. Today in the Voice of Yoga, we will talk about fear as the defense mechanism for the false sense of existence called this world. Listen as we discuss the idea of accepting spiritual identity as a solution to any and all claims of false belief. In this show, we will explore the scientific statement of being in Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures by Mary Baker Eddy, page 468. There is no life, truth, intelligence, nor substance in matter. All is infinite mind and its infinite manifestation, for God is all in all. Spirit is immortal truth. Matter is mortal error. Spirit is the real and eternal. Matter is the unreal and temporal. Spirit is God, and man is his image and likeness. Therefore, man is not material, he is spiritual. Welcome to the Voice of Yoga. We are talking consciousness. Join the Kriya Yoga Spiritual Advance to get the light in your soul and live in the truth of being. Swami, today's title of the show is F.E.A.R, False Experienced as Real. Can you give us a brief description as to what that title should mean to us?
Well, like we said in the opening, that fear is a defense mechanism for the false sense of existence. Instinct, appetite, preservation, survival, which is a big part of what is governing the human experience. We're starting to see the entire human experience isn't real. And so we're learning how to come out of that. Whereas what most of us are doing today is we're trying to manage our fear with stress reduction or stress management. Even the way we would employ a lot of the techniques and strategies in yoga are just there to manage our fear. But here we're learning the goal of yoga is liberation from this false sense of existence, the belief in two powers, which is governed by the law of karma, the cycle of death and rebirth, where what we're putting out is what we're getting back. And so the more that we learn about yoga as a spiritual science, you really see how it's a practical guide for highly effective living because it offers us a real solution and not just a Band-Aid or a way of managing our instincts, appetites, and false beliefs.
Well, I've heard some other terms for the definition of the false sense of reality, and that's Maya or illusion. And I think those are words that some ancient cultures were dealing with so long ago.
Yeah, in Buddhism, they talk about Maya, illusion. We've always introduced that in our teaching. What is reporting in our five senses isn't real. And what we mean by that it isn't real, it means that it's not separate from the divine creation, which is right here, right now. But the difference is the divine creation is whole, it's complete. And this illusion, what is reporting in our five senses, is really just a thought about it, that the physical world is just a mental image about the divine creation. And if we are stuck in that thought loop, then we're disconnected from the divine creation. And so as a result, we don't have the benefits that would come with fidelity to divine creation.
I know we've been talking a lot about this false sense of creation and that how it relies on belief to have it have this existence. So let's talk about this belief and how fear is connected to the belief.
Yeah, see, what we have been teaching all along is that thought is an energy and it's capable of producing effects, but it's all measurable based on the amount of strength that it's emitted with. And so that's what drives this thought loop that we're in. It drives this hypnotic state that we believe that we are a mortal being. But that's not backed by divine law. I have a quote here from Joel S. Goldsmith that I'd like to read. Knowing this truth will make us free, but while we are knowing it, our thoughts and actions must conform to the truth we are knowing. We cannot be denying the power of effect and the next minute indulge in it. Or to put it more bluntly, we cannot deny the power of effect and then hate somebody or fear somebody because he is a part of that effect. That's the end of the quote. And so this is what I think happens. We mix our beliefs. We have a belief in matter, we have a belief in mind, and we have a belief in spirit. And what happens with that, you never get out of the realm of concept. In order for us to really find solution to this thought loop, we need to assume spiritual identity. And then, of course, you really have to understand what that looks like when you're doing it. Because spirit is a demonstrable principle. It's not just a declaration. So many of us say, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual. I practice yoga and I'm really into the spiritual aspect of it. But if we don't really know what it means to be spiritual, we're just working with our concept about it, which is going to be very different than when we actualize the experience, when spiritual light dawns on our consciousness, because it's very different with regard to the dynamics of it, because you can't be in a personal sense of self and be spiritual at the same time. In the same way, light dispels darkness, truth dispels the error. When you're in the truth of your being, you have graduated to that level of consciousness where everything is one. You're no longer seeing the many, you are now seeing the whole. That changes everything because remember, how we think is what we become. And when we're thinking with our human 5 sense mode of thinking, we're in this thought loop. But when we can forsake these modes of mortal thinking and graduate to divine mind, now we're thinking in the absolute. The divine mind is too pure to behold iniquity. It doesn't see the divided consciousness. It doesn't see the belief in two powers. It doesn't see the many. It only sees the whole.
Well, let's talk more about understanding what we mean by talking about fear-based motivations.
Yeah, most of us are driven by fear. We're coming into the understanding that all fear-based motivation is violation to spiritual law. If spirit is all and all is good, what is there to fear? Because from a spirit level of consciousness, we're seeing things subjectively. Everything is within yourself. Everything is under the one umbrella, under the one law. And it is the law of absolute harmony, absolute love, eternal life. Spirit being whole, there's nothing that needs to be added to it or taken away from it. And it is a changeless state of being. So again, there's no concern that this is going to go along for a certain period of time and then it's going to change on me. It doesn't work like that. And I think the real question that comes up here is we're realizing that if spiritual life is the only life and it is eternal, what is the human concept of life that is vulnerable and expires? Because the minute we accept a second life, we step out of the one real life and are not under the protection of divine law.
Well, if we can get back to fear-based motivations, what would be some examples of those? How would we recognize that when we're doing that?
Yeah, I think a perfect example of it is worry. Worry is a good place to start with that. Say, for example, a parent worrying about a child. And we think we're doing a wonderful job, but we have our back to the divine law, the divine will. And we find that we're not under the protection of divine law. And so a lot of this requires a better understanding of how everything is working. And it becomes apparent as we advance in this that we can't be a mortal being and have these divine privileges. This is a lot of what is supported in the Bible, where it talks about sowing to the flesh, sowing to the spirit. The more that you drill down with these terms and you start to employ them, you start to see that these are principles. These are laws that we can actually understand and begin to demonstrate.
Well, what's interesting is I see many people every day with the job that I have, and a lot of people, instead of saying goodbye or so long, they're saying stay safe. And it seems to me that that is a fear-based salutation.
Yeah, not only is it fear-based, but it also is reinforcing the belief in two powers. It's reinforcing the belief there is something other than the allness of this one divine life. And so this is how it starts to create a failure force, because we believe in sickness. We believe in death. We believe that we were born. The more that you come out of that and you start to shift your awareness from material to mental and eventually to spiritual identity, then you really don't know what this is going to do for you until you're doing it. As you start to come out of those fears and all of the things that are motivating us, and you start to see that you are an intricate part of a greater sense of life than what we have accepted as a lifespan, there's no longer going to be any fear. There's no longer going to be anything to worry about, because you're not under the government of the law of karma anymore. You're no longer believing that you are a separate entity that has needs. And you start to see yourself in the context of this broader sense of awareness, this eternal life, which is who you really are.
So Swami, check me on this. So when somebody says to me, stay safe, I always come back with, and I say, I always am. And so to myself, I'm thinking I, not meaning Lisa, but I is that divine part of me. Am I correct in doing that, or should I say or do something different?
No, I think that's the best use of the personal pronoun I, that you are living out from the belief in the one life. And if there is but one life, then who am I? Who are you? And the more that you start to do that, not only do you start to see yourself as Jesus would say, I and the Father are one. You start to see this oneness. Then you start to realize that's not a person out there, but it is the one divine life appearing as a person. And so you're processing things very differently at this level of awareness.
Well, I think we'll pause right here to hear a word from our sponsor. So listeners, we'll be back with you in just a few moments. Kriya Yoga Theory 2 is a unique and revolutionary practice and forum designed to facilitate the growth process in human development. Apotheosis is a real experience and has an evidence procedure. You cannot lead lead someone to permanent change by doing for them what they must do themselves. Personal accountability and responsibility are the foundation of Kriya Yoga Theory 2. You must be engaged and devoted. Prana power brings virtue to overcome fear, wisdom to overcome ignorance, purpose to overcome selfishness, enthusiasm to overcome laziness. Kriya Yoga is a path of action, knowledge, and devotion. These sessions are a celestial positioning system to guide the individual into union with the divine. For more information or to sign up for your next session online, go to www.ipdtransform.com. Namaste. Welcome back. For those of you just joining us, you're listening to The Voice of Yoga, and we are talking consciousness. So, Swami, I'd like you to check me on something else, too. We were talking about worry as a fear-based motivation. We had talked about a parent worrying about a child. Now, I realize that's probably something, when you're a parent, you're just automatically always going to be worrying about your child. But to tell them not to worry would be like asking them to step off the boat. And I know we've been talking about that. Like, if you can't step off the boat, then you haven't had the spiritual realization. So we don't want to use this as advice. So what do we do?
Yeah, you can't really advise people with this. Divine science is a demonstrable principle. You must prove it. Like Mary Baker Eddy says, Jesus walking on water was science. But for poor humanity to step off the boat before they can walk on water isn't wisdom or science. And so you can't just tell a parent, don't worry, unless you can show them the truth of their being. If you can lift them into spiritual identity, then from that perspective, it's a very different way of communicating, because now you have shown them, you have proved the presence. But to do this with human advice, you're still at the level of belief. And you yourself don't really understand it to the extent that you can prove the presence. It's really not recommended to advise people to do this. What you may want to advise them to do would be, say, for example, advise them to listen to Herb Fitch, Revelations of St. John, Class 6A, where he says the purpose of mother is to open that child to a realization of divine life. And what the mother has been doing by all of her maternal, materialistic guidance is telling the child to obey something external to herself. Okay, and that's the end of the quote, which is exactly what we're doing. It all comes down to a belief in matter and sowing to the flesh, which leads to death. As we say, like attracts like. Without spiritual identity, we react to the 5 corporeal sense testimony. We believe in 2 powers, and we're activating the law of karma. But what we're trying to do in these shows is to educate people beyond corporeal sense level, beyond the belief in matter, is this larger sense of life. And it's a demonstrable principle. What I found in all my years of searching and seeking, there are a lot of people who talk spirituality. We talk about being spiritual. We talk about the paranormal of spiritual experiences that we may have. But to the best of my understanding, the only one for me that really demonstrated this with any kind of scientific certainty was Mary Baker Eddy. And so once I started to discover her work and I started to immerse myself in it, I started to see the wisdom in what she's teaching, that it is a demonstrable principle, that spirit is a reliable, dependable, affordable resource that is available to us if we have eyes to see, if we have ears to hear, which means that if we assume spiritual identity, if we develop our spiritual senses.
Well, speaking of Mary Baker Eddy, why don't we explore the scientific statement of being that can be found in Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures, page 468. And I'll read that quote one more time. There is no life, truth, intelligence, nor substance in matter. All is infinite mind and its infinite manifestation, for God is all in all. Spirit is immortal truth, matter is mortal error. Spirit is the real and eternal. Matter is the unreal and temporal. Spirit is God, and man is his image and likeness. Therefore, man is not material, he is spiritual.
What you say there, to read that is absolutely meaningless until you can start to unbox that, until you have this spiritual light dawn on you. In Christian Science, they call that spiritual light the Christ, the saving aspect of truth. It is that which makes the divine creation intelligible to human consciousness. The divine creation is right here, right now. But if we have a belief in matter, if we think what is reporting in our 5 corporeal senses is real, we're hypnotized. We're under the law of karma. We're in the cycle of death and rebirth. And so reading this to somebody is absolutely meaningless. It's useless. But to demonstrate that is a completely different story. And the more that you start to immerse yourself into divine science, into our approach to Kriya Yoga now, you learn that you can attune your mind-body complex to the divine idea. That's a practice that will enable you to gain a better understanding of yourself spiritually by attuning yourself to the divine creation, by coming out of our modes of mortal thinking and starting to know ourselves spiritually, starting to think with divine mind as opposed to our mortal mind, starting to abide in the divine creation as opposed to the man-made world that is appearing in our corporeal senses.
Swami, I'm just looking back at the phrase scientific statement of being, and I look at that with being as with a capital B. The part where she says, man is his image and likeness, therefore man is not material, he is spiritual. But just to think that would be a lot different than to know that.
Right, and isn't that what the Tibetans say? To know and not to do is yet not to know. To think that you're spiritual is not knowing. This scientific statement of being is knowing. To know the truth that makes you free. These are some of the things we're working on. This is a provable principle. If you understand yourself spiritually, you must be able to reveal the truth, which appears to corporeal sense as healing. You're correcting the thought that if the physical world is a mental image, and it's a more complicated mental image than what I think my thought is about something, because there are 3 modes of mortal thinking. One of them being instinct, appetite, preservation, and survival, which is the fear we're talking about. The other is human intelligence. And it's our ability to form thoughts and opinions based on the information coming through our corporeal senses. And then the next layer of mortal thought is the collective consciousness, world thought, the collective consensus. And we have to come out of all of these modes of mortal thinking because it's a divided consciousness. It's a belief in 2 powers. And divine mind isn't about thinking. It's about knowing. And it's about knowing the truth. It's about knowing the divine creation, the perfection of being, which is under divine law, above and trumps karmic law. But we must know it to activate it in our experience. And the more that we practice shifting your awareness from material to mental and eventually to spiritual, you're going to start to see that the physical world is a mental image, but the more divinely mental it is, the more harmonious and indestructible it will appear.
We're talking about understanding and knowing. Reminds me of that phrase, ask in my name. People think, oh, Jesus, please do this for me or that for me. Can you just maybe shed some light on that for us too?
Ask in my name really translates into ask in my likeness. And it makes more sense when you understand it to mean spiritual identity, because spirit is whole, without needs, and it resides in unity with all life, and therefore there's no fear there. There's no worry there. The other thing about that is it's almost like a trick question, because ask in my name means you know yourself in the way that you are created by the divine, which is perfect, which would really mean that there's nothing that needs to be added to or taken away or fixed. When you know yourself in the way that you're created, in the image and likeness of the divine creation, you're perfect.
Well, interesting. I think we have a story from Paramahansa Yogananda when he actually had a fear about food.
Yeah, Paramahansa Yogananda tells that story when he is with Sri Yukteswarji, and it was time for him to go out and beg for food. Yogananda had some reservations and asked his teacher, what do I do if no one feeds me? And the reply was, die. Because if no one feeds you, there is no God. And without God, life is not worth living. In the Bible, Paul tells us that we must die daily. These practices were designed to get us out of personal sense, get us out of the belief that I am a finite, vulnerable, mortal being. Not just to do this in a way that you manage your fear. You shift your identity from the false to the true. When the truth of your being is revealed to you, you know everything that is in the divine creation is yours. And with that comes a tremendous amount of confidence. You can't just believe that. In the framework of this practice, we have to graduate from thinking and believing and even from faith into understanding, where this becomes a demonstrable principle. Jesus proved this when he fed the 5,000. All he was doing was revealing the divine creation, which didn't need anything added to it or taken away from it.
So Swami, how do we know when we know?
The litmus test is found when spiritual identity is attained, and we will not know what that can do for us until we do it. Because spirit dissolves everything that is not spirit. So personal sense disappears in spiritual light. We lose that personal sense of self. We lose the vulnerability, the belief that I am mortal. As we shift our identity to immortality, to where I am whole, I am finished, I am complete, we live and move and have our being in that realization, then that does the work. And the work it does is it resolves things into thoughts and exchanges the objects of sense for the divine idea, which then externalizes as what we would call a healing.
Well, I do think it's about that time we have to start closing down our show for today. So listeners, be sure to visit the website, www.ipdtransform.com. Once you're on the homepage and you see the fading banner, Blog Talk Radio, click that. That directs you to the Blog Talk Radio Show catalog page. And then don't forget, clicking on the products tab and online classes directs you to all the classes that Swami has available. So with that, Swami, any final thoughts about today's program?
Well, I would like to encourage people to join the Kriya Yoga Spiritual Advance to get the light in your soul and live in the truth of being. Namaste.
And thank you for listening to our program, The Voice of Yoga. This is Lisa Winton along with Swami Jayananda signing off. Have a wonderful Kriya Yoga kind of day. Namaste.